Okay, hello to everyone watching. I'm Vincent, and in this video, I'm going to talk about how I set up the Wise project for my capstone game, the Draft. And I'll also go over a couple examples of the sound effects that I made in Ableton and in Serum. So we'll start out in Wise, and as you can see, I divided the project into 5 actor mixers, and that is mostly for organizational and editing purposes. I found that grouping sounds by categories helps with keeping the mix balanced, and it just makes it easier to adjust groups with of related sounds as necessary. And you'll also see that I have one blend container that isn't part of the other actor mixers, and I'll talk about that shortly. So I wanted to give a couple examples of some of the sounds I made. There are about 100 or so sounds in the project right now, and I'll just play a couple of my favorites. So first up, we have Gabby, and that stands for General Audio-Based Intelligence. Gabby kind of acts as the helper to the player during the match. She keeps the player up to date on things such as when units score and letting the player know that combat is about to begin. So I'll just go over a couple lines that we recorded for her. So this sequence container is this houses the lines that plays when the match is about to begin for the player.
Greetings, strategist. I am Gabby, your general audio-based intelligence. Today's match will be played in the Nordic fjords. You will be leading the Azuma Misthawks. Please activate the start orb to indicate you're ready.
So yeah, so that's one sequence container that we have for her. And then when the player actually goes to start the match via the start orb, this sound effect will play.
Confirmed. The match will now start.
So yeah, when I was designing Gabby, I wanted her to be sort of like kind of unbiased towards the player in terms of what was happening in the game. But we also wanted to give her a little bit of personality for the player, just so that it wasn't just like another bland AI. So I'll go ahead and give an example of what I mean by that.
Enemy victorious. Consider tactical changes in the future.
So yeah, so there's like a little bit of snarkiness in her voice, and I'll go ahead and show one more to kind of show that that Gabby was sort of on the player's side too.
Attention, strategist. The match has ended. Your team was victorious. Congratulations!
So yeah, you can see that Gabby has some personality, and that it's not just some basic AI giving a voiceover for the player. So let's see. Next up, with the miscellaneous actor mixer, I think this one has the most sound effects housed together. There's just a bunch of random sounds in here, like whenever the player selects a unit or sends them to a certain location, or various impacts, like whenever a body hits the floor or something. And I think some of my favorites are when so this sound effect right here is when the player activates the shield for blocking. And that's one of the sound effects I made in Serum. Next, I have the units actor mixer, and this kind of houses the majority of the voiceover for the swordsman. Right now, we're recording for the other 2 swordsmen that are going to be in the game for the players team, and we have Bane done right now. So I'll just go ahead and go over some of the lines that we have for him. So these lines occur whenever the player is about to enter combat.
I accept mercy for blood. Allow me to rearrange your face.
And then these voiceovers are for whenever a unit scores.
This is too easy. One step closer to victory.
So yeah, just to give you guys an idea on how everything sounds in the game. And then I think my favorite of the sound effects that I've done, some of the weapons were fun to make. I actually had 2 versions for the archer whenever the player would pull the arrow back. I ended up going with this one, and I made this in Serum. And then when the arrow is released, we have the shot sound. And then we wanted to have a sound effect to let the player know that they actually hit something. So it's just like your basic little tick sound. But still satisfying, of course. And then the other one that I had fun making was the sword, uh, the idle sword hum sound. And I also made this one in Serum, so I'll go ahead and play that now. So yeah, so that was the sword. And lastly, the thing that I want to talk about for the actor mixer hierarchy is this dynamic audience. So when the designers and I were talking about how we could make the game feel more like a sport, I had an idea to make a dynamic audience that reacts to certain events in game. Some of the events included whenever combat ends, depending on who won, a cheer would occur, and another one was if one of the teams scored goals consecutively or they were starting to go on a run of points, a chant would also occur. So the most difficult thing about making this dynamic audience was just getting the recordings done. I wanted to have around 15 or so people for them, and getting the people together was definitely the most difficult thing to do just because everybody was always so busy. And I wanted there to be like a real authentic sound to the chants. But once I had the files, I was able to edit them within a couple hours and set it up in Wwise. And so there are a couple ways that I could have set it up, and I feel the way that I have it right now is the easiest. I'm basically using one RTPC value, which pretty much acts as like a variable, and I just need to adjust the value of that to get the different chants to play. I also have two switch containers, which house the different chants for the teams. I have it set it up in game to switch between the chants after they've been played, so the redundancy of the same chant never actually happens. So I'll go ahead and just give a demonstration on how the dynamic audience works. So as you can see that this RTPC value, which if I didn't say before, it stands for real-time parameter control. And they're basically just variables that you can manipulate in engine. And this RTPC value right here, audience excitement, all I have to do is adjust this, and the sound effects or the different chants will play over the bass crowd. For the interactive music that we have for the game, there's separate phases that the player is going to be in. And first off, the strategist phase is when we have the player commanding units and choosing where they go on the map. And when two units meet in the battlefield, the player is transitioned into combat. And we wanted to have two versions of the same music playing that suit which phase the player was in. So when I was writing the music, I wanted to keep it simple and not too deering for the player to listen to. I didn't really want it to grab their attention. And those are just a couple things that I needed to keep in mind when I was writing it. And I'll just give a quick example of how we have the music set up. So if you look down here, I'm going to have the state to strategist, and then I'll switch between the two different states as we go along. So yeah, that hopefully gives you guys a basic gist of how we have the music set up. And I think the last thing that I want to mention for the Wwise project is we use the priority system that Wwise offers, and it just helps us bring up things that we want the player to hear. we decided that Gabby would be one of the most important things for the player to be listening to, so she has the highest priority in the game. And then there's other things in the Wise project that aren't so important for the player to hear, and they have a much lower priority. So like this impact for when an object hits the ground, it's set to 40 because it's not a super important thing for them to be listening to. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and show a couple of the sound effects that I made. The first one that I want to show is kind of unique in how I went about making it. CRM has this cool tool that lets you import PNGs and it converts them into wavetables. So basically what I did, I got an image of one of the programmers on the team, and I took the picture and I made it into a wavetable. And hopefully you can see it right here. But this was the basis of the sound effect for when the sword collides with the shield. So I'm going to play that right now. So yeah, I have two sound effects right here. And then the sound that Jake actually makes is this right here. Okay, so for the next one that I wanted to show, this is when the player pulls the arrow back. When I was making this one, I just used some classic EDM type sound design techniques. And basically I'm using this saw sine, or the saw wave right here. And I'm using this analog sine wave as a source of frequency modulation for it. And then I'm also passing it through this phase filter and some of the effects that I was using for it. I have a little bit of hyper in it to give it a little bit more stereo and detune. Adding the distortion, the tube distortion, to give it a little bit more of the grittiness. And then I was kind of EQing out just a hint of the high end. So I was kind of just like smoothing out the sound effect. But the thing that gives it the most oomph is this multi-band compressor, and this gives it that final touch to the sound that makes it what it is. So I'm just going to go ahead and play it. And the other thing I want to mention is that this LFO right here is basically just giving it a little bit of movement for the cutoff of the filter. And I just want to show how important this multi-band compressor is. So that's with it on, and then this is as acting as just a normal compressor. All right, and so for this one right here, this is the dynamic audience project that I was working with. Once I had the files in, it didn't really take me that long to mix it. Basically what I did, I would take a portion of the chant and I would just edit that, and I would make it a perfect loop so that I only had to worry about 2 or 3 seconds of the chant and not have to worry about the other parts of the chant. It basically just made my process a lot faster when I was mixing it. And so the post-processing isn't too crazy, but it's important for the sounds itself. And basically what I'm doing, I'm passing it through a reverb, this concert hall reverb first. And then once I do that, the glue compressor actually gives it that kind of echoey sound. And I have the wet all the way up, so all you're hearing is the compressed version of that sound. And then I'm basically just EQing out the high end for the sound. And so this is what it sounds like with all the post-processing on it. And then this is how it sounds without the post-processing. So yeah, the quality of the recordings are actually really good, but the post-processing definitely helps a lot with making it a much more realistic and stadium sound.